Have a good meeting.
Are we broadcasting, Mark?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and call to order the meeting for July 9th, 2020. It's 2:03. I'm going to read the notice of meeting statement since Commissioner Blackwood's not going to be available. A meeting notice announcing the date, time, and place of the July 9, 2020 Commission meeting was distributed July 8, 2020 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance. Next item is the adoption of agenda. Would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as proposed.
So moved.
So moved, Chairman.
So I saw Chairman Malfris make first and Commissioner Rawlinson second. So we'll have Malfris as the mover and Rawlinson as the second.
Thank you.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Next item is introductions. So that's primarily for the folks who are there in 251 who are visiting with us. So we appreciate you guys being here. If you'd like to introduce yourselves, please.
Okay, I'm Bill Livingston. I'm a consulting engineer with Swigert and Associates.
I'm Brad Jasinski, consulting engineer with Swigert and Associates.
Keep coming this way. Andrew Theron, I'm the Director of Engineering here at EDSS.
Chris Clark, CFO.
Rufus Barrett, Associate State Director of Operations.
Pat Manley, Deputy Director.
Ed Miller, 6th Congressional District Commissioner.
Great. I don't think we need to do those of us who are online. I think it's all listed down, so I'm not going to ask for introductions from that standpoint. As much as possible, let's try to make sure that we're, if we're not talking on those of us online, not so much those in 251, to keep the mics muted to minimize the amount of feedback that we're getting, just to make sure everybody can hear okay. All right, next, appreciate the introduction. Again, appreciate those who are joining us from outside our regular community who are here today. The next item on the agenda is the general HVAC design principles. And again, I think for our purposes, this meeting is going to be focused on the state project J16-9920. So I think as you guys are addressing those principles, let's try to focus it towards how it relates to that project as much as we can, not to interfere too much with what you guys are saying. But I will turn it over to Brad and Bill to make their presentation with regard to that item.
Okay, I'll, this is pretty informal, so, if anyone has questions, kind of it's in a discussion type format rather than, presentation. So again, anyone have any questions, feel free to ask, and we'll do the best we can to answer. But I wanted to kind of start from just an overall general HVAC design concepts standpoint. And, with your agency in particular, you have a lot of existing buildings, a lot of existing systems that you're maintaining. As they get old, they need to be replaced, obviously. And, sometimes the technology has changed a good bit. So what you have in place may not be the best solution now. This building 320-420 is a perfect example of that. But, let me just kind of talk about some of the concepts and things we have to think about when we design systems. Probably number one is ventilation, especially in a facility that's occupied 24/7 by residents. We've got ventilation codes that we have to meet. It's a little different than an office building where people come in and they work from 9 to 5 or what have you, and they leave and you close the close the outside air dampers, you don't have to ventilate at night, turn units off, et cetera. With these facilities that are occupied by your consumers, you know, we've got to make sure the ventilation codes are met. And then when we do ventilation in South Carolina, the biggest problem we have is humidity. In the summertime, you know, we're bringing all this outside air in, and if we don't properly treat it and condition it, you're going to end up with humidity problems, mold in the buildings, and that sort of thing. So, you know, again, ventilation is one of the biggest things we look at. Next thing would be sustainability, and that's kind of serviceability is sort of the same thing. You know, how well can you maintain it? I mean, we can design a system that's, you know, the greatest thing in the world, but if you don't have, you know, enough maintenance or qualified technicians or people that are familiar with the systems, in 6 months, this stuff's going to break, you know, and it's not going to work, and you're going to have issues. So whatever we design, it's got to be fairly simple. We want to make sure it's maintainable. All of us, all the agencies we work with, you know, have limited maintenance budgets, limited maintenance personnel. So we've got to give you something you can maintain. And then finally, budget. You know, budget's important for everybody. Again, we can design you the best system in the world, but if you can't afford it, you know, what good does that do us? So, you know, those are the things we have to look at. Now, going back to what we said with 320 and 420, again, you know, sometimes these building systems are 20 years old, 30 years old, or, you know, even older. And technology back then was a lot different than what we have now. So, for example, with the 320 and 420, they're using chillers and boilers. And these are small buildings. You know, they're relatively small. In a new building today, gosh, it would have to be maybe 100,000 square feet or, you know, 50 to 100,000 square feet before we even consider putting a chiller and boiler in, just because of the, you know, the expense, the maintenance expense, long-term, you know, issues that you deal with, because now you've got water systems you have to treat. You know, your typical maintenance technician is not going to work on a chiller. You're going to have to call Trane or, you know, one of the big chiller service companies to work on those. So it's, you know, doing a direct replacement for exactly what's there, you know, may make sense, but then you look at it and say, well, golly, if we do that, it's going to cost you 2 or 3 times what a different type system would be. You're stuck with something that's hard to maintain, and it may not be doing a good job of heating and cooling the building. So, so we always kind of step back and look at it and say, what makes sense? What can we give you that, you know, can fit your budget, is easily maintainable, you know, and then can work in the existing building? Because we can't, you know, as much as we'd like to be there on day one when they built the building and design something that fits your needs, we really have to kind of figure out what makes the most sense for what you have. So I was going to talk a little bit about a project we finished, but you know, we don't necessarily need to get into that.
Yeah, if we want to stick to just 320, 420, they're not, yeah, maybe not reviewing any other existing projects unless somebody just has a question. I think Bill was intended to talk a little bit about the dental clinic at Coastal Center, a previous project they had done. That's kind of along this path, but if we don't want to get into other projects, we can stay focused on this one and just move forward with 324.
Yeah, because it's similar. It was the Witten Center, but it's a similar type system where they had a chiller and a boiler and a multi-zone unit, sort of a small building, and you know, again, it could have been 2 to 3 times what the system ended up costing if we had just replaced it, you know, chiller for chiller, boiler for boiler, you know, et cetera. So, but now 320 and 420 are very similar. They again, they have a chiller, they've got a boiler, had a little ventilation unit, but they also had fan coils. And in 320, 420, you know, it's down in the low country. So humidity's bad here in the Midland, but it's even worse down there. So they had a lot of envelope issues where, what I mean by that is the building had some leaks and you had infiltration and you had air getting in. I think, Brad, they said they had moisture coming up through the slab. So we had a lot of moisture issues that had to be tackled. And the existing system just was not doing a very good job of controlling the moisture. You had condensation on pipes and equipment, and there was limited space above the ceiling to run ductwork. So there was a lot of challenges with the building and really kind of, again, had to step back and say, does it make a lot of sense to just replace exactly what's here with, the same type equipment? And it really didn't. It was, it's going to be a good bit more expensive than what we ended up designing and recently did.
This is Stephanie Rollins, and I'm Commissioner for the 7th Congressional District, which this facility falls in my district. I have a question or two. One, I just started on the commission last month, so I just need a little bit of background. Can you tell me what led us to this point of replacing this unit? Is it currently functional? Is it not functional? Do they currently have heating and air in that building? Or where is the situation currently in that facility?
Stephanie, I've got some information here on the the units that existed prior to this upfit, and the HVAC systems, were approaching the end of their useful life. The dependability on them to function properly when they needed to was in question. The maintenance and operation, of the boiler system that Bill has talked about was also an issue. These were also R22 units, and R22 to get into kind of another area of HVAC. It was discontinued in the United States in 2010.
Yeah, that's the Freon R22.
Yeah, and these units, because they were R22 units, would have been more expensive to maintain in their previous conditions. So, getting in there while we had the chance to upgrade everything to a more newer and more efficient system was just something that we've had on our radar for a while now. And that had to do with just complaints from Coastal Center about the operation of these systems.
Okay.
And it was put on our 5-year CPLIT plan back in fiscal year 17-18. And approved by the commission back then. So it's been identified for a little while, and it's mainly due to the condition of the existing system. So
okay, I'm kind of familiar. We our middle school here was under one of the same systems, and we obviously it kept breaking down, and we were having to have parts built through 3D printers and all that kind of stuff to keep it operational. And so I'm sort of familiar with that system and kind of understand what we're talking about here, but I just want to make sure that they currently have something, and they're not just sitting down there with no air conditioning in those buildings.
Yeah, the existing system is functioning. It's just they are again just reaching the end of their useful life, and
Okay.
have just been identified as a system that needs replacing. So
Okay, very good. I just wanted to verify that we aren't in an emergency situation down there.
yeah, no, and some of the stuff I was planning on talking about today, the CPIP process, and kind of goes over how we identify things like this and how a project kind of becomes a project, in the end. So
When you say useful
Can we
life,
get David in on this so he can ask a couple of questions so that we can, because I think he's the one that's got most of them.
Yeah, I mean, do we want to go through the principles first and then go through the bid? I mean, do we want to, at what point in time do we want to start getting into that versus the background information? And a lot of that I'll leave to David, since I know he had the most questions. So, David, can you hear us?
David,
David, you hear us?
do you have questions you would like to ask at this time?
No, I'm just listening. I'm receiving everything as information, and most of this I generally know at this point. There would be a few questions at the full meeting, but none of these gentlemen. I appreciate very much them coming and explaining, and thank you very much.
Okay, so let's sort of keep on to the agenda then, I think, Barry, if that's okay with you. And we'll let them.
I got a couple of questions, but we can move on.
I just want to try to stick to the agenda as much as we can. You know me. I'm an agenda guy.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So let's, how much more on the design principle stuff do you guys want to cover at this point?
I think that really wrapped it up. That was kind of a good segue with the question.
Perfect. Great. So then, Andrew, if you want to give us the review of the bid process.
Yeah, the bid process, again, this all starts from our CPIP list, which is, to kind of give some background on the CPIP process. It's a policy and guidelines for all state capital improvement projects are established by the CBO, the Capital Budget Office downtown, which is under the Department of Administration. And this project would qualify as a capital improvement project, which is defined by the CBO as construction of new facilities and any work on existing facilities, including their renovation, repair, maintenance, alteration, or demolition, with a total cost of work that exceeds $100,000. So going into this, we knew it was going to exceed that amount. And so it was put back on the 5-year CPIP plan that was submitted to the CBO back in fiscal year 17 and 18. The 5-year plan, it's got to be submitted to the CBO every June, and historically it's been approved by DDSN's commission in May or right before. Typically we send it downtown. I think the development of that 5-year CPIP list should be an open process here for the agency. I think we need to have everybody involved, and I definitely want to thank the commission for the questions that kind of led to this meeting. I think in engineering we spend a lot of money on facilities, and I think the process should be thoroughly vetted, and that these questions should be asked. So I definitely want to thank Commissioner Thomas for his engagement in the issue and on this topic, and for asking the questions that he did. And of course, we're always excited to talk about HVAC design. So, so we welcome this opportunity, and glad we get to update you guys on it. But to get back to the CPIP process, it's a 2-phase process. There's a phase 1 approval and a phase 2 approval. The phase 1, we would submit our 5-year CPIP plan to the CBO. They would approve it. When we're ready to initiate a project, we would submit for phase 1 approval, which is a pre-design phase, and they would allow us basically 1.5% of our internally projected budget to go out and hire guys like Bill and Brad here to put the larger scope together and come up with a more detailed budget. Once we get that, we submit it for a phase 2 approval. And once we get that, we're ready to engage guys like Swigert Associates for full construction services, and we're ready to design, bid, and build this thing at that point. And to just go over some dates associated with this project, it first appeared on our 5-year CPIP plan again in fiscal year 17-18, and it was approved by the commission May 17th in 2018. We first received phase 1 approval in October 17th, 2018. We received phase 2 approval on January 17th, 2019, and bids were finally taken on June 4th, 2020. During the time this project was advertised, we had 7 contractors request plans, and on bid day on June 4th, we received 3 bids, with McCarter Mechanical out of Spartanburg being the lowest. And again, I think we talked about some of these figures back in the last commission meeting, but $444,104. And I think that was about $500 less than what Swigert Associates construction cost on this thing was way early on in the project. So they nailed it with the construction cost on this one. But other than that, pending commission approval, we're ready to move forward with this project, and that kind of sums up the bid process and how it went about. So again, just want to thank the commission for being here today, and glad you guys get to meet people like Bill and Brad. They've done a lot of work for the agency, including central office here, the building we're sitting in now. They did the system here, and they've just worked with us for a long time, and we appreciate all the work they've done for us. So.
And at time of phase 2 approval, we got to fund the project fully, right?
Yes, yeah. But you don't necessarily have to have it fully funded when you submit for phase 1, because again, they're only approving 1.5% of the budgets. But by the time you submit for phase 2, you've got to have all the funding in place. So.
And it's sitting downtown waiting to be paid to a vendor.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Eric, for giving us an update on the status of where we're at with the bid. So I think moving on to the next item, focusing on this, I think a lot of it's going to be from Brad and Bill, at least before we start taking any questions regarding how we went through the process of establishing the parameters for the bid, where exactly that came from. Basically is the background on that, I think, so that we're comfortable knowing exactly what the bid entails, if that makes sense. If you guys can cover that.
Well, we had as Bill mentioned earlier, the systems in these buildings were chiller boiler type systems with, 4 pipes. We had old fan coil units that were above the ceilings that were extremely hard to service just because of getting access to them. The structure in these buildings is a kind of a combination of wood framed, and there's also some steel up there. And the way these units were, for lack of a better term, crammed up above the ceiling, the fan coil units that is, just made service really difficult. And like I said,
we lost Mr. Commissioner Thomas. Do you want me to try and call him back?
Let's try to get him back, obviously. Yeah, let's go ahead and try to get him back.
Sorry.
no problem.
She got real quiet. I'd be in a bad spot.
He was driving through the mountains. Driving through the mountains or something.
Hello, this is David Thomas. Please text me any message that you have.
All right.
Let's give him let's just give him a minute and we'll try it again. Just because obviously I want to make sure that he's hearing this. I know a lot of his questions were focused on that. I don't know if anybody wants to try to ask any other questions. I know, Barry, you had some. I don't know, Stephanie, if you had any more. Ed, if you had any more. Do we want to try to get to those now or just wait for David to come back?
If anybody's got any additional questions about the CPIP process or how projects become projects or, how we get to this point, we can talk about that some more. Or, if anybody's got any specific.
I pretty much understand. I do want to ask one question. So, am I understanding that this basically has already been approved and already been funded? What is the purpose of us re-looking at it? Can you tell me that?
I think mainly it was because of Commissioner Thomas's questions at the last commission meeting.
No, you have to sign any contract over $200,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when we presented it to you to sign the contract for $444,000 is where the questions arose.
Okay.
And that's what we had to be.
But it's already been approved by the commission prior to us, is what I'm saying.
As a project.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The bid itself has not been approved, Stephanie. What we approved was we set the money aside and then we take the bids and then we have to approve one of the specific bids. So that's what's actually up for vote is, are we accepting the bids as presented?
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
presented.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify.
It took me a long time. It's this very odd, when you run the state, this very odd sort of multi-stage system of you start a project years before you're actually ready to accept a bid. So.
Gotcha.
Slow down the spending of money.
I just have one question. What was the bid prices, the other 2 bids that came in? What were those numbers?
I've got them right here.
What are they?
Let me see here. The second low bid was from Case Company out of Florence. It was $487,000. And the high bid was Triad Mechanical out of Charleston for $521,402.
Okay. So then.
Hello, this is David
And we did a project similar to this one last year for 520. We got a pretty low price on that at the time, but I think, you know, with the contractor that got involved, that was, you know, Southern, what was it?
Low Country.
Low Country Refrigeration. I think the bid price was about $175,000 for one of these buildings. And again, that's a little bit lower than what we're looking at here, but I think we got a contractor on board who really.
If I remember right, they were much lower than the second bid.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, back to the project, the 520 project, the low bidder on that one bid just under their allowed licensing.
Okay,
maximum.
but we all can agree that it's not necessarily that the low bidder is the one that actually received the contract. You did your analysis on the 3 low bids, correct?
Yes, in McCarter Mechanical, you know, they are, we have a history with them. They've done a lot of work for us.
Okay.
So they've been deemed to be responsive and responsible in the past.
You answered the question. Because I know that in the industry, it's not necessarily the low bid that the contract is awarded to.
Yeah, the 520 would be a good example of that. If they were, that Low Country Refrigeration would have bid again, we wouldn't have accepted them. So
Be on the same page.
I can't seem to get him back on the phone.
Okay, well, if it answers again, I mean, if it doesn't answer again, I'll go ahead and ask my 2 questions, I guess.
Go for it. If
Yeah,
that's all right,
go ahead.
Mr. Lamel.
Yeah, Barry, I think that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, I mean, I hope David can hear it, but I doubt it. But anyway, the only 2 questions I had one was, I'm assuming that I know we're putting in a different system than we did before. I think that's a moot point considering, considering where we are and how old this system is. But my question is, I'm assuming this is a system that has a filtration system similar to what they put now into places to prevent things like COVID-19 and things of that nature as best they can. It has a special filtration in it for purifying the air and that sort of thing. I assume this one has that in it.
no, it does not. That would be basically an add-on after the fact. What he's referring to are the ionization filters that we've looked at for a lot of facilities. These units don't come with those. I mean, I'm not sure if they come with them installed or not, but we're looking at those as add-ons to existing units. So this one does not have one on it, but it's you can add it to any system.
Yeah, the typical, well, any system would not have that kind of technology added on for the factory. Those are always a third-party device that's added, and they're done that way because those type systems typically have to be specifically engineered for a particular building. It's not a one-size-fits-all, so they have to. You have to look at the space and the use and the whole building, and then get the right component for it.
Can you speak to the cost that you think that's going to be? Because I know we're already doing things like that.
For that particular building, you're probably in the neighborhood of about $5,000 or $6,000 based on similar size building.
Hello, David Thompson.
Yeah, because we're looking at some of that already,
Yeah.
Mr. Malphus, as far as adding some of those aftermarket type filtration.
Yeah, and the UV filtration that I know Rufus has brought up in the EOC meetings and stuff, all of those are kind of aftermarket options that you could add to these type of systems that would just help clean the air a little bit more than the regular filtration systems.
So we're saying it would not be. It would. So this company, I mean, the company that's putting in the AC system is not the one that does that. Then you call a different company and pay a different amount of money.
No, we could have the contractor on site do it. It's just not included in this project. So it's something that we can do after the fact.
And we don't know and so you don't know without them looking into it whether it's cheaper to do it with them while we're doing it, or if it's cheaper to wait. It's cheaper to get bids and wait another for the $3,000 or $5,000 or $6,000 and see which would be better. Is that right? Because I know the next thing we're going to come up with is people are going to say, oh, COVID-19 never went away, so we got to, get a filtration system. I know that's coming up next, but I got another question after that. So
Yeah. I think we wanted to start exploring, the installation of those on a lot of our facilities. So if we were to move forward with it on 320 and 420, it would probably be part of a larger bid package that includes all of the dorms on campus. So
the other thing I'd like to touch on the filtration is the majority of the systems in these buildings are not recirculating in effect, that they're not taking air from one client room and distributing it to another room. And the outside air unit, which does serve the entire building, is not recirculating it. It's not recirculating at all. It is 100% outdoor air that's distributed throughout. So I don't know if that I think that alleviates some of the concerns with COVID-19 as far as distributing throughout a building.
Can you hear him? Okay, he looked like he got frustrated. I didn't know.
I'm sorry. My stupid phone went off. What was the last sentence you said? I got it off now. What was the last sentence you said?
Well, I was just commenting that the majority of the systems in these buildings aren't recirculating to the point where they're taking air from one room and distributing it to another room, mixing it together, and then like a full building, a central ducted system. We don't have that for the most part in these buildings.
So you're saying the filtration wouldn't do any good then?
Which one do I look at, indoor?
I think there's some benefit, but in the nature of the design of this type of system, it limits the spread of air throughout the whole space. So the air from one room doesn't get returned and mixed and sent to another room. It stays in that room.
Okay,
So,
all right.
So that's one, I guess, benefit or side effect of this type of system design. So that does help you there.
Okay. Well, the only other question I had, and I'm sorry to bother you so long, but because this is really not for me to be asking questions, but I'm asking them anyway. The only other thing I had to ask was, well, I guess it is sort of me. I'm here, but anyway. The only other question I had was, I got to think of it now. Oh, in the meeting, this was a big thing that I made a note of. I'm a huge note person, so forgive me for that too. But it was asked by somebody in the actual meeting when we were discussing this about the ductwork, and it was said that we were replacing part of the ductwork in this situation, but not all of it. And I wondered what percentage was being replaced and whether it would be advantageous for us to figure out how much. Well, go ahead, answer that question first.
The only ductwork we're not replacing in these buildings is the exhaust system. So we're leaving that in place. We're putting a new fan for the exhaust system, but the ductwork itself, we didn't think it warranted being replaced.
Hello.
In spite of its age, it doesn't warrant being replaced. I mean, isn't this like a 40-year-old? I mean, how many year old system is the one we have now?
I think the original buildings, I think they were built in the late 60s, I believe. So, I mean, the ductwork is old. I guess from our standpoint, it's exhaust. So it's not putting any, if it's dirty, it's not depositing that debris to the building. It's just, exhausting it out to the roof.
And it's metal ductwork. So it's, the metal is still in good condition. It's not rusted or deteriorated. So structurally it's still sound, and it's sized correctly and oriented correctly. And, really, in our opinion, it was in good shape to be able to be reused.
Okay, so it's not, and there's no need to clean it or anything like that.
Not the exhaust.
Okay, all right, that's really the only two main questions that I had. I know that, I think that the only thing the thing that frustrates me a little bit right now is that I think that David had a couple of questions that he was going to ask at this time, but I don't think we can get him.
Hello, this is Dave.
Yeah, and I want to say, I think Commissioner Thomas had a lot of questions about energy efficiency and kind of how we, how that's considered as part of the project. So I had some of that stuff I kind of wanted to go over with them. And we could do that, we could do it individually with them or.
I mean, we could do an email format and we could field some email questions and respond to the group.
Let's do this. Had you seen his email previously, the email he sent July 6th that sort of focused on what he was talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure did.
And I have it here, and I was going to ask one thing about it.
Yeah. So Barry, why don't you go ahead, and then Andrew, if what you were just talking about, was that sort of in response to what David had emailed on July 6th?
Yes, it was. Yep.
Okay. So Barry, why don't you ask your question, and then I'm going to let Andrew talk a little bit as well.
I mean, the only other big thing that I wanted him to ask and I don't want to steal thunder, and I really wanted him to ask it because to make sure he wanted to know it again. But the only other thing we were wondering about was, or seemed to be wondering about was, this CPIP, organization, and this is really for our engineer, not so much for the people that are doing the project. This is really not about the project itself. This is really about energy efficiency once we have the project. So I don't know if we want to get into that right now or not. I don't really have any more questions about what we're doing with this particular project.
Yeah. So Andrew, if you'll sort of address the comments that you had with regard to this, and I'll maybe bring.
Yeah, Commissioner Thomas, I think in his email was asking about basically energy audits and complying with the South Carolina Energy Efficiency Act of reducing energy in state agencies by 20% by 2020. My personal opinion is that was kind of an ambitious goal set by the state government back when the law was passed. But, not saying that it's bad. I think, getting people to strive for something like that is definitely a good thing. And I think it's worked for our agency. But 20% agency-wide, again, that's a lofty goal. To give you an example, we did a renovation on this building, central office, back in 2015. We did reduce the energy consumption in this building by about 20%. We also reduced the cost by about 20%. That 20% cost translates to about $20,000 per year that we're saving in utilities on this building. To achieve savings of $20,000 a year, we spent almost $2 million, $1.7 million. So I think if you just looked at the return on your investment based on energy costs, you're looking at about 75 years or something like that. So, to sit there and say you're going to spend all this money to save energy is not feasible in a lot of situations. I think it's more of a perk that you get for replacing the system when you need to. I think a lot of Commissioner Thomas's questions were geared towards that. But this building is one where we did achieve that 20% goal. Agency-wide, from the earliest data I have is starting about 2011, and since then, agency-wide, we've reduced energy usage by about 11% agency-wide. Now, the Energy Efficiency Act, they wanted us to reduce 20% from 2000 levels, and I don't have data for our agency going back to 2000. But from the earliest data I have, again, until now, we've reduced energy costs by about 11%. And that's a lot by pursuing projects such as HVAC replacements, lighting replacements, and building envelope upfits. When those projects arise and we have a need to go and address those items, we always do it from a energy efficiency standpoint. Our engineering department has always been pretty in tune with energy savings. We are regular attendants of the energy conference put on by the Association of South Carolina Energy Managers. And right now, we currently have 2 staff, myself and Mr. Greg Adams, who are certified commercial energy managers. So it's something that our department has always been in tune with ever since I've been here with the agency. And those considerations on how to reduce energy when we tackle those types of projects are something that we always think about. So I think that's some of the stuff that Commissioner Thomas was getting at in his email. But again, if he wants more information on that, we can always, bring him up to speed, individually if he'd like. So.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Ed Miller.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, because what we're looking at here is the fact that every building is built differently, different environment, different material, because it all depends on the structure. Because at the end of the day, we're dealing with an R value. The R value in this building is different than the one across the street in the hospital. And I look at it this way. They said to me some years ago that if I get a certain water heater, it would be energy efficiency and I would save so much dollars. I went back 5 years and looked at my light bill. Then 2 years after I put it in, I look at my light bill again, it went up. So you spend all of that money and don't get nothing for it. That's the bottom line.
I can personally show you tons of data where we've saved energy, but energy costs went up, so we spent more. So this idea that you're going to pay for something with savings, it doesn't always work like that.
No.
A lot of it depends on what the rates are doing and how much you're paying for energy, not necessarily what you save. So it's just you got a multitude of factors in there. That it's not always as simple as save energy, save money, pay for the stuff.
Every law, somebody gonna get some more money.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, this is Stephanie Rawlinson, Commissioner.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Talk to me about the efficiency of the units that we're putting in at Coastal, and are they actually going to save them some efficiency? Can you give us some information on that, if you don't mind?
Do you guys have anything about the specific SEER ratings of those units?
All right. Cover. Well, now what you need to do to change it though. All right.
Yeah, it's not specifically listed, Andrew. The other one comment I would have on that is, when we upgrade these systems, we upgrade to current codes from a ventilation standpoint, and there's nothing energy efficient about introducing outdoor air into a building. But we have to do it. We have to do it from a code standpoint and just to make sure that the occupants are safe, from a ventilation, to make sure you don't get like a sick building. So the variable refrigerant systems that we're putting in that we're proposing to put in 320 and 420 are very efficient. I don't have specific numbers.
I think a general rule of thumb for a VRF type system of this nature versus a standard system, baseline, the lowest efficiency unit you could put in by code is probably somewhere in the 40% to 50% more efficient, due to a number of reasons, but they are a lot more efficient than your standard heat pump system that you would put in.
And as far as I'm concerned, they answered 2 very important questions, Stephanie. One would be ventilation, the other one too, that would be backflow. Because if that backflow, if it backs up, then you got an issue. But if you keep, and those are the things that I was interested in making sure that I heard that. And they have answered my questions on those items.
Thank you.
And Stephanie, just to kind of cover, what we did here in this building back in 2015. Again, we put in it's not the exact type of system. This one is more of a variable air volume and not really a variable refrigerant type system. But again, just a more modern system. We are bringing in fresh air into this building. Same that they're doing there. This building is not a 24-hour operation. Now, we did other items on this building, such as we really sealed up our building envelope, and we did lighting as well. But we were able to save about, again, 20% in this building, with the HVAC being a large part of that. So just a similar project.
And Brad does bring up a really good point. We see this a lot, is that we get into buildings that are older, built by older codes that didn't require the ventilation, or the ventilation is just not functioning. And this building was one of those that had very poor ventilation. And so now you're actually doing more work. You're not only cooling it, you're bringing in all the outside air per the codes like you should. And so being able to do the extra work and then still save 20% is pretty impressive, I guess.
So,
Okay, well, I got one other question for Andrew then, I think, and I'll be done, I think. And assuming we can't get in touch with David, I guess we can't.
I've called him about 15 times at this point. Can't get him.
I'm sorry.
25?
I'm really sorry you can't, but I know you tried.
I just tried him again just a second ago.
Okay. Well, let me just ask one other thing. Andrew, and I'm sorry if I got the name. You are our engineer for the agency, right? I mean, for the.
Sir.
Okay. All right. The only other thing that David had mentioned in the email that was intriguing to me a little bit was I just wanted to know what you knew about and what you thought the pros and cons of something called the National Association of Energy Efficiency Companies.
Yeah.
And as far as I understand, they are companies that come in and figure out energy efficiency, and they only get paid if they save you money, kind of thing. And I just want to know what your general attitude of those kind of companies were. I know they're private companies, but other than that, what is your general attitude?
Yeah, that's kind of what I tried to get into when I was talking about, what we saved here at central office and what it cost us to do that. So there's a private company out there that can come and squeeze any more juice out of what we got. I'd be surprised. Again, we saved 20% here, which amounted for about $20,000 a year, and that was a complete overhaul of the building. But it cost us $1.7 million to do that. So if there's a company that could come along behind us and say they're going to, save us some amount of money that would pay off $1.7 million, I'd like to see it. I don't think it's realistic in a lot of situations that you're going to pay for these upgrades with energy savings, because again, next year the rates could go up, you're paying more money, you're not going to see any savings. I've always kind of.
I don't even understand how they work because it says they come in after the fact, so it really doesn't make much. But I haven't read enough of. I haven't read detailed on it, but it just seems like they come in after the fact, and I was kind of confused about that. And David had talked to some other people about it, and I was going to ask him or have y'all tell him more about it or ask more about it. But since we can't get him, I don't want to talk anymore about it because I don't like talking about things I don't know much about.
Yeah,
so,
if he would like to sit down individually and kind of look at how the numbers work and some examples that we can point to here in the agency that we've done pretty extensive renovations to. And what the cost savings actually are, and sometimes again they don't equal savings, depending on what the energy company wants to charge you next year.
Yeah, because the rate comes up and then you're back at square one, right? The rate of the electricity, right?
Yeah.
Right.
We
would have been even more if you weren't energy efficient.
And I can jump in just from my experience. We have worked with energy companies before, and we partnered with them, and I think they do provide a service for particular applications and particular clients. School districts are great clients for energy companies because schools oftentimes have lights that sit on all night and air conditioning units that sit on all night, and that's the kind of things that they come in and help you do, is to do setbacks and turn units off and turn lights off and that sort of thing. The one catch that energy companies have, they will write contracts that have provisions in them. So if the agency doesn't do XYZ, well then they're not on the hook anymore.
They're harmless.
They're harmless, and then you got to pay them.
Yep.
So it's you got to be kind of careful when you deal with them, and you really kind of need to know going in that you've got some areas that could be targeted and could really use the services of an energy company. And again, a lot of times where those companies can help you are lighting retrofits or building controls where you can turn systems off at night and on the weekends. But you've got so many facilities that are occupied 24/7 that there's not much opportunity to get additional savings, because you have to keep your consumers at same temperature all night and all week. So I don't know. It's
Okay, so I'd like to
Think of
focus
the good
in on that just a little bit, because this sort of comes to the core of what I'm interpreting as David's questions. With regard to this particular project, for the experts in the room, would it have been appropriate at the outset of that project to incorporate or bring in an energy services company to do an analysis?
Yes, I would say, this is Ed Miller. If this was before we went and gathered up any bid documents and wrote any specifications, and they decided they want a certain amount of data, it would be an excellent idea. But this right here, this is after the fact.
Right. Well, that was going to be my follow-up question. It was, okay, where we are now in the bid process, does it make any sense to bring in an energy services company?
Zero, because that should have been a part of the engineering and architectural design. If they were at the table then you could determine whether or not you wanted to hire them based upon the data that they bring to the table. And I'm working on a project right now. As I look back, there were certain things I probably was not supposed to sign off on until certain questions are answered. But once you get into the project, if it's not a design and build, not a design bid build, then design and build, once we accept it, whatever extra cost is on them. But a bid, then there are change orders. It's the same thing when we was talking about going and dealing with the units themselves. Once that's in place, every time there's a change order, it's like a new automobile. If you're going to especially order an automobile and you want the bells and whistles, you can actually give the manufacturer that and say, build it to this specification. But it's going to be a different cost factor. After the fact, it's totally different.
Mr. Chairman, this is Stephanie Rawlinson.
Yes, ma'am.
Could we possibly look at something saying in the future, before we take on any bids or projects like this, that we bring them in and make that a part of that process for our future bids, just to see where we are prior to taking on any other projects?
That was going to be my next question as well, which is, if it's not appropriate for this project, again, focusing particularly more on you, Andrew, to what extent is it appropriate for us to do that on projects going forward?
I don't think these companies have any magic, potion with regards to energy savings. I think people that have always been in our engineering department, myself, guys like Bill and Brad here, we're all pretty in tune with energy savings and what it takes to achieve, a more efficient building. I don't see what they're going to offer that guys like Bill and Brad here can't, to some extent. We're going in with the latest and greatest, most efficient systems. To say that somebody can come behind that and do something extra that's going to lead to all these savings, I don't see it.
I think if you were to give you an example, if you were to build this central office building today, if you were building it from scratch, then you would have a lot of decisions to make on what type of insulation to put in, what type of windows to put in, what type of HVAC system to put in, and all of those decisions affect the overall energy use of the building. And so if at the beginning of that kind of project, you brought somebody like this in who could look at and analyze all the different, take the data from all these different systems and find the most economical, energy efficient way to do it, then there's some benefit there. But when you're talking about a like this project, the 320/420, you might have two or, maybe only two different options. And so you're really only trying to decide which of these two options is your most energy efficient method. And you might spend 10% of your construction costs to get somebody to come in and run all the data and run the numbers and give you information that, is probably already sort of intuitive. So really it's more of a big picture type thing where they can help you versus a smaller project that's, with limited types of decisions to make. Does that make sense?
Yes, but if Andrew as our engineer is up on energy savings, then what good are they really? I mean, what I'm saying is he should be able to, even if we're starting a project from scratch, he should be able to come up with all the information they have, shouldn't he, or should he?
Yeah, it's, again, they're like Bill said, they're doing pretty intuitive things on smaller projects like this. I think to elaborate on Bill's point, if you want to look at how all the systems in a building work together, then maybe on the front end they would do it. But when you're just dealing with limited elements of the building, and this project just HVAC, there's not too many different options you're going to approach it from. So the idea that there's just some huge savings out there that you can achieve, I don't see it.
Doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Okay, well, all I'm saying about that is I'm not sure how much good it would do even if we were doing a new project, because if we have an engineer like that is supposed to already be in the know, then I'm not sure this does much good. I guess we'd have to talk to. I don't know how much further we can get with this meeting without talking to David about any other questions he has, because
if anybody's had any success with one of those companies, I'd like to speak to them. So
send them to me first.
Okay, all right. Well, that's the kind of thing I wanted to hear. I'm gonna. I got what you're saying now.
All right.
All right.
Does anyone else have any questions at this time? And Stephanie, I didn't mean to sort of jump over your question. That was basically the same one I was getting ready to ask.
No, that is exactly what I need to ask, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Any other questions from anybody? Any other comments? Appreciate all the input everybody's been given. Anything else from staff or Swigert and Associates at this point, based on what you've heard?
I don't know of anything. I just don't know of anything else I think we're just spinning around.
What I would say at this point in time is obviously this will be up on the website. Hopefully David will be able to at least look and see the conversation that we had. Maybe we addressed some of what he was going to ask, and then for him to follow up individually, either with Ed first or to Andrew. Does anybody else have any business related to the purpose of this meeting then to bring forward at this point? All right, hearing none, would entertain sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Can you tell me what the schedule is for this project to be started and completed once we approve it?
What would be the lead time on this type of equipment, Bill?
Unfortunately, with the COVID issues the factories are dealing with, the lead times have kind of been all over the place. We could certainly call and check and get that for you.
I would imagine it'd be 6 to 8 weeks, probably out, something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. If we were to sign a contract today, I mean, we probably a month and a half out from starting work. So just to give you some idea how long it would take. So.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
As far as I know, our plan is, Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, our plan is to vote at the next commission meeting.
On the bids, correct.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay.
I would move we adjourn.
I was just about to follow that. Do we have a second to that motion?
Oh.
All right, well, I just want to thank again the commission for, again, y'all's engagement in topics like this. Again, we're always happy to talk about HVAC whenever you guys want to. So thank you.
No, my wife doesn't want to hear it, so. Appreciate
You don't want to hear it.
We're adjourned.
Thank you very much.
In the early, late 70s, they started